January 1944. The sky above northern France is a steel-grey canvas, streaked with the contrails of distant bombers. The cold wind bites through the cockpit glass as a formation of P-47 Thunderbolts slices through the clouds. The hum of their powerful Pratt and Whitney engines vibrates through every bone of the airframe. Below, German fighters patrol, scanning the horizon. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s, sleek and nimble, glide confidently, their pilots smirking at the sight of the Thunderbolts. They see a bulky, oversized American plane, slow, ponderous, and easy target. Laughter echoes through their radios, a brief, reckless dismissal of what they believe is an unthreatening enemy. But these Thunderbolts carry a hidden fury. 8.50 caliber machine guns, perfectly aligned in their wings, are ready to unleash a storm of lead. And behind the controls, Allied pilots trained in long-range escort tactics are poised, their eyes scanning, their hands steady, hearts synchronized with the thrum of raw power. As the first German fighters dive in for an attack, the Thunderbolts drop into a dive of their own. Bullets tear through the sky. The smirk on the Luftwaffe faces begins to fade. Confidence wavers. The slow, fat American fighter is no longer a joke. It is the prelude to a deadly revelation. The air war over Europe is about to change forever, and in these skies, the Thunderbolt will earn its name as the aircraft the Germans underestimated at their peril. By the early 1940s, the skies over Europe were the true proving ground of modern warfare. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, had already demonstrated its lethal efficiency during the Blitzkrieg campaigns in Poland, France, and the Low Countries. Its Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s dominated the European theater, executing precision strikes, close air support, and intercept missions with near-impossible speed and coordination. The Allies, in contrast, struggled to develop aircraft capable of matching the Luftwaffe's performance. British Spitfires and Hurricanes were formidable, but numbers were limited, and American fighters initially lacked the range to escort bombers deep into German territory. Meanwhile, the United States had been quietly building an industrial juggernaut. Factories in the Midwest churned out thousands of aircraft, engines, and weapons, driven by the scale of American production and the vision of engineers who refused to compromise. Among these efforts was the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, a massive, heavily armored fighter designed for high-altitude interception and long-range bomber escort missions. Its development began in 1939, with the goal of creating a fighter capable of both survivability and overwhelming firepower. Its 2,000-horsepower Pratt and Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine made it one of the fastest and most robust fighters in the sky, while its 8.50 caliber machine guns promised devastation to any enemy aircraft caught within its firing arc. By mid-1943, the first Thunderbolts began arriving in the European theater. American commanders faced a strategic dilemma: how to protect bombers on raids over Germany, where Luftwaffe opposition was relentless, without exposing pilots and aircraft to unacceptable losses. The P-47, with its combination of speed, range, and firepower, seemed to offer a solution, though its bulky frame and unconventional design initially caused skepticism, even among Allied pilots. Training programs intensified, focusing on high-altitude formations, dive tactics, and coordinated escort maneuvers. Pilots were drilled to trust the Thunderbolt's armor and firepower, learning to exploit its strengths in both air-to-air combat and ground attack roles. Reports trickled back from the first sorties, hinting at the Thunderbolt's potential, though the Luftwaffe remained unaware of the storm about to descend upon them. The stage was set. European skies, long dominated by German fighters, were about to witness the arrival of a machine that would challenge assumptions, redefine engagement strategies, and force even the most confident Luftwaffe pilots to reconsider the cost of underestimating an American plane. By late 1943, the P-47 Thunderbolt was being deployed in larger numbers across the European theater. Bases in England buzzed with activity as newly arrived Thunderbolts were readied for missions over occupied France and deep into Germany. Their role was clear: escort Allied bombers, ensure their survival, and if possible, inflict maximum damage on Luftwaffe interceptors. For the German pilots, however, these planes initially seemed almost comical, large, heavy, and ungainly. Reports from Luftwaffe units often referred to them dismissively, comparing them to flying tanks that might be slow but would pose no real threat to agile German fighters. Early encounters quickly proved those assumptions dangerously wrong. Thunderbolts, despite their bulk, could match the speed of German aircraft in dives and could sustain damage that would cripple other Allied fighters. The 8.50 caliber machine guns, concentrated in the wings, allowed P-47 pilots to unleash bursts of firepower capable of shredding the lightly armored Bf-109s and Fw-190s in seconds. In escort missions over the Ruhr Valley and northern Germany, bomber formations protected by Thunderbolts reported dramatically reduced losses. Pilots recounted German fighters diving aggressively, only to be met by a withering wall of gunfire that left aircraft smoking or spiraling out of control before they could reach the bombers. By January 1944, the P-47's presence in the skies was impossible to ignore. Intelligence reports noted increased Luftwaffe caution during engagements. Pilots, once brash and overconfident, began adapting their tactics, flying higher, waiting for opportunities to ambush, or avoiding encounters entirely. Some veteran German pilots admitted that the slow American fighter was far more dangerous than initially thought, combining resilience, speed in dives, and devastating firepower. Meanwhile, Allied strategists recognized that the Thunderbolt's durability and offensive capability allowed for bolder missions, including strafing runs against ground targets and attacks on trains, convoys, and airfields behind enemy lines. The contrast between perception and reality, the German pilots' laughter versus the lethal truth of the Thunderbolt, set the stage for dramatic air battles over Europe. In these skis, confidence and experience could be undone in seconds by a machine the enemy had misjudged. And so, the story of the P-47's deadly impact was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding in real time, threatening to reshape the Luftwaffe's dominance and forcing both sides to confront the consequences of industrial ingenuity and tactical adaptation. For the men in the cockpit, the P-47 was more than a machine, it was a lifeline. American pilots quickly learned that trust in the Thunderbolt's armor and firepower could mean the difference between survival and disaster. Unlike lighter fighters, the P-47 could absorb hits from enemy fire that would down other aircraft. Pilots returning from missions often recounted returning with dozens of bullet holes in their fuselage, sometimes even in the cockpit area, without the plane losing control. The psychological effect was profound. Confidence in the aircraft allowed pilots to press attacks more aggressively, supporting bombers and engaging Luftwaffe fighters without hesitation. Conversely, German pilots faced the shock of seeing their targets shrug off hits that would have destroyed any other Allied fighter. Tactically, the P-47 changed the dynamics of air combat over Europe. Its high-altitude performance and dive speed allowed pilots to maneuver aggressively against enemy formations. In escort missions, Thunderbolts could descend rapidly to intercept attackers or dive away to avoid traps, using gravity to enhance speed. German fighters, accustomed to confronting lighter, less resilient aircraft, found these maneuvers difficult to counter. Coordinated P-47 formations allowed for overlapping fields of fire, creating lethal zones for Luftwaffe planes attempting to reach bombers. This shift in aerial tactics forced German pilots to rethink engagement strategies, often leading to hesitant attacks and higher losses. At the heart of the Thunderbolt's effectiveness was its technology. The Pratt Whitney R-2800 double wasp engine delivered immense horsepower, enabling impressive acceleration and high-speed dives. Its 8.50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, synchronized across the wings, could unleash sustained bursts of lead capable of shredding German fighters. Coupled with heavy armor around the cockpit and fuel tanks, the P-47 could survive damage that would cripple other aircraft. This combination of offensive and defensive capability made it a flying tank in the eyes of both friend and foe, a terrifying prospect for pilots who underestimated it. The convergence of human skill, tactical innovation, and technological superiority set the stage for the Thunderbolt to assert dominance in the skies. Pilots' trust in their aircraft, combined with careful escort tactics and lethal weaponry, began to tip the balance in favor of the Allies. Allied commanders recognized the strategic potential of the P-47 early on. Leaders like General Jimmy Doolittle emphasized long-range bomber escort missions, confident that Thunderbolts could keep formations protected over the heart of Germany. The aircraft's durability allowed pilots to execute daring operations that were previously too risky with lighter fighters. Conversely, German leadership faced a growing challenge. Luftwaffe commanders realized that traditional interception tactics were becoming increasingly costly. Orders to avoid frontal attacks against escorted bombers became more common, and experienced pilots were increasingly cautious, often abandoning aggressive maneuvers to preserve their squadrons. The P-47 was reshaping not only battles, but entire operational doctrines on both sides. From the German side, initial underestimation of the Thunderbolt quickly turned to wariness, and for some, fear. Luftwaffe pilots described the aircraft in reports as heavily armored, nearly impossible to destroy in a single engagement, and deadly in a dive. Accounts highlight the psychological shock of facing multiple P-47s in coordinated attacks, an experience that shattered confidence and forced tactical reconsideration. Veteran pilots found their usual agility-based dogfighting strategies often ineffective. Reports indicated a marked increase in German losses during encounters with Thunderbolts, leading to both immediate tactical changes and long-term adjustments in Luftwaffe deployment. From the German side, initial underestimation of the Thunderbolt quickly turned to wariness, and for some, fear. Luftwaffe pilots described the aircraft in reports as heavily armored, nearly impossible to destroy in a single engagement, and deadly in a dive. Accounts highlight the psychological shock of facing multiple P-47s in coordinated attacks, an experience that shattered confidence and forced tactical reconsideration. Veteran pilots found their usual agility-based dogfighting strategies often ineffective. Reports indicated a marked increase in German losses during encounters with Thunderbolts, leading to both immediate tactical changes and long-term adjustments in Luftwaffe deployment. Spring 1944. The European skies were a theater of relentless conflict. The Allies had intensified bombing raids over Germany, targeting industrial centers, rail networks, and oil refineries. On March 6, a formation of B-17 flying fortresses from the 8th Air Force set out for Leipzig, escorted by a squadron of P-47 Thunderbolts. The Luftwaffe, confident in their experience and superior maneuverability, launched multiple waves of interceptors, Bf-109s diving from above, FW-190s swinging in from the flanks. What followed would leave a permanent mark in air combat history. As German fighters closed in, the Thunderbolts held formation. Their pilots, trained in coordinated defensive tactics, allowed the attackers to approach, then unleashed their full firepower. 8.50 caliber machine guns roared simultaneously, spitting streams of tracer rounds that tore through FW-190 fuselages and clipped the wings of Bf-109s. In seconds, experienced German pilots found themselves spiraling to the ground or retreating under the punishing hail of lead. The P-47's dive speed proved decisive. When pressured, pilots could dive almost vertically, outpacing pursuing fighters and returning to altitude to strike again. This boom-and-zoom tactic maximized both survivability and lethality. Pilots reported a surreal experience. The enemy, once brash and taunting, now hesitant and calculating, forced into defensive maneuvers they had rarely employed before. Allied bombers, previously sitting ducks for the Luftwaffe, now continued their missions with fewer losses, a direct testament to the Thunderbolt's dominance. On the ground, German intelligence began to note the pattern. Reports from Luftwaffe squadrons emphasized a sudden increase in pilot losses during escort engagements. The slow American fighter had become a nightmare, its pilots skilled, its tactics disciplined, and its firepower unmatched. In these early decisive encounters, The P-47 was no longer an experimental or underestimated aircraft. It was a recognized threat, reshaping the calculus of aerial warfare. June 13, 1944. Allied bombers targeted the synthetic oil plants in Merseburg, a vital hub of the German war machine. Escorting them were over 100 P-47 Thunderbolts, forming a disciplined, protective screen. The Luftwaffe scrambled its fighters in waves, hopping to overwhelm the escorts and inflict crippling losses on the bombers. Veteran German pilots, some of the most experienced in the Reich, dived into the assault with lethal precision, yet the Thunderbolts met them with calculated fury. The battle erupted into chaos. Thunderbolts swooped down from higher altitude, utilizing their superior dive speed to strike and disengage at will. Their 8.50 caliber machine guns unleashed torrents of fire, systematically dismantling the attacking formations. Observers noted how entire squadrons of Bf-109s and FW-190s were reduced in seconds, their pilots forced to break off or risk destruction. Even the Luftwaffe aces, confident in their skill and maneuverability, found themselves outmatched. Many accounts describe the air as thick with tracer fire, smoke, and falling aircraft, a scene of aerial carnage that shifted the psychological balance in favor of the Allies. By the end of the mission, the Luftwaffe had suffered significant losses. Reports estimated dozens of German fighters destroyed or damaged, while Allied bomber losses were minimal. For many German pilots, the encounter was a turning point. The slow, fat American fighter was a lethal adversary, not merely a nuisance. Subsequent engagements over Germany followed similar patterns. Thunderbolt pilots, confident in their aircraft's resilience and firepower, executed aggressive escort tactics, strafing runs, and dive attacks that left the Luftwaffe constantly on the defensive. These decisive battles confirmed the P-47's reputation. It was not just an escort fighter, but a game-changer in the air war. The Luftwaffe, forced to adapt its strategy, began deploying more cautious intercepts, avoiding direct confrontation with fully escorted bomber formations whenever possible. The P-47's combination of speed, armor, and devastating firepower had transformed the skis, turning confidence into caution and laughter into dread. By the summer of 1944, the impact of the P-47 Thunderbolt on the European air war was unmistakable. Luftwaffe squadrons, once confident in their ability to dominate Allied bombers, faced mounting losses and growing apprehension. Reports from German units indicated that encounters with Thunderbolts now carried a higher probability of death or serious injury. Veteran pilots described a chilling realization. No amount of agility or experience could guarantee survival against the combined speed, firepower, and armor of the American fighter. Allied bomber crews, previously vulnerable to concentrated Luftwaffe attacks, began reporting higher survival rates. Missions over the Ruhr, Berlin, and industrial centers in northern Germany saw fewer aircraft lost to enemy fire, largely because Thunderbolt pilots could intercept German fighters before they reached the bombers. The P-47 had effectively shifted the tactical balance in favor of the Allies. For bomber commanders, this allowed for more aggressive, sustained bombing campaigns that increasingly crippled German production and infrastructure. The psychological impact extended beyond numbers. German pilots entered combat with a heightened sense of caution, hesitating before engaging fully and sometimes avoiding confrontation altogether. In contrast, American pilots gained confidence, emboldened by both the Thunderbolt's survivability and their ability to inflict devastating damage in return. The aircraft was no longer just a tool of war, it was a symbol of industrial and tactical superiority. Strategically, the Allies began to rely on the P-47 for multiple roles beyond escort: low-level ground attacks, strafing runs on trains and convoys, and suppression of German airfields. Its presence forced the Luftwaffe to disperse forces and reconsider standard operating procedures, a shift that gradually eroded their dominance over European skies. As the war progressed, the P-47 Thunderbolt solidified its reputation not only as a bomber escort, but also as a versatile combat aircraft. By late 1944, Luftwaffe reports consistently highlighted the challenges posed by the Thunderbolt. Even small formations could repel attacks from multiple enemy fighters, and pilots could survive hits that would have destroyed lesser aircraft. These evaluations reinforced the growing understanding within German command that the balance of air superiority was shifting irreversibly. Post-war assessments confirm the Thunderbolt's extraordinary contributions. The aircraft flew more than 400,000 sorties during the war, destroying thousands of enemy aircraft and vehicles while suffering relatively low attrition in comparison to its impact. Its durability and firepower influenced post-war fighter design, setting standards for armored cockpits, multiple heavy-caliber guns, and high-speed diving performance. Engineers and military historians alike have pointed to the P-47 as a turning point in air combat philosophy, where survivability and concentrated firepower became just as vital as maneuverability. Personal accounts from surviving pilots underscore the human dimension of this technological triumph. Veterans often recalled missions where, despite sustaining damage, they returned to base, sometimes with entire wings riddled with bullets, engines smoking, or control surfaces partially destroyed. These pilots credited the aircraft with saving lives, allowing them to fight another day and instilling a deep respect for both its engineering and their own skill. On the German side, memoirs and interviews reveal a mixture of awe and grudging respect. The Thunderbolt was the aircraft they had laughed at, only to discover it was capable of overwhelming even the most experienced and daring Luftwaffe pilots. The Thunderbolt's legacy extended beyond statistics and strategy. It reshaped the psychological battlefield, forcing the Luftwaffe to reconsider tactics, reassign squadrons, and acknowledge a new reality. The era of unchecked air dominance was over. The flying tank that Germans had mocked became the instrument of their tactical humiliation and ultimately a critical factor in the Allied victory over Europe. The story of the P-47 Thunderbolt is a testament to the intersection of human courage, engineering ingenuity, and industrial might. In the skies over Europe, it transformed the very nature of aerial combat, turning laughter into fear and doubt into respect. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns, powerful engine, and armored fuselage were more than technical specifications. They were instruments of survival, deterrence, and strategic leverage. For the pilots who flew it, the Thunderbolt was a partner in war, a machine that demanded skill, rewarded precision, and offered a rare measure of protection in the chaos of combat. For the Germans who faced it, the aircraft became a harsh teacher, forcing adaptation, humility, and ultimately recognition of a new era in air power. It symbolized the relentless evolution of warfare, where technological innovation could decisively shift the balance, and where assumptions, no matter how confident, could be fatal. Beyond the battles, the P-47's legacy echoes in the philosophy of air combat. It demonstrated that resilience and concentrated firepower could be as decisive as speed and agility, shaping designs for generations of fighters to come. And on a human level, it reminds us that courage in the cockpit is inseparable from the machines that carry it, the trust between pilot and aircraft often determining the line between life and death. In the end, the Thunderbolt story is not only about bullets and dogfights. It is about the transformative power of engineering, the stakes of misjudgment, and the quiet yet undeniable ways a single aircraft can alter the course of war. It remains, in history and memory, a symbol of precision, power, and the unforgiving reality of the skies, a deadly surprise that the Luftwaffe would never forget.